For me, I thought the elegance of the 67 vintage was quite apparent in several of the wines. For instance, the Capilano, I just love the beautiful transparency and red fruity quality to it. And at the same time, the beautiful explosive finish that says it's a great vintage for me, even though it was delicate and mature on the nose and on the attack. But I thought it showed very well.
And it's also it's one of those wine. I mean, as a wine merchant, I would say it's one of those wines that 9 out of 10 people that you would sell it to would completely dismiss it once they pour it out. I mean, it looks like it's dead. You know, color's terrible. It's washed out. But you know, it's one of those Barolos, one of those old Barolos. You really have to give it a chance and try to understand it. There's a great deal of beauty there, but it's not at all obvious.
Did people like the Odero?
Yeah.
I loved it for its elegance. At our table, a few people thought it was a little out of its league, would be fine on its own, but couldn't stand up to things like the Giacomo Quinterno.
It's the most subtle, and there was something a little musty, a little off right at the beginning that made me worry, but it blew off. But yeah, it's a much different wine.
It was a little sweaty, but it had just great youth coming on in the finish. It kind of curled under and gave you like this pull, a tug at the end. Like
Yeah,
it
I thought
didn't
it was
just lay flat. It just was like, okay, I still have somewhere to go.
Perhaps the most Burgundian of the flight in style. But I was quite impressed with it. But I came to the table wanting to be impressed, so I wanted to check with everybody else to see what they thought. And what did people think of the Francesco Rinaldi?
Well, it confirmed. It's the second time I've had this wine. First time in 15 years, and it hasn't aged a day.
I believe that.
And 15 years ago, I was convinced that it was one of the famous Francesco Rinaldi bottlings that had been kept in demijohn for some period, which is something that he would do, and which explains why it was so impossibly young looking. I mean, young in all respects, I think. And just a quick look at the 64, suggests sort of the same thing. I mean, it's the deepest color, and I'm pretty convinced that certainly the 67 and possibly the 64 as well spent at least part of its life in demijohn.
I thought it changed most, evolved the most in the nose. It had this kind of almost like spurious sweetness, a confiture quality on the aromas initially.
Yeah, it was almost balsamic.
Yeah,
First pour.
and then that dissipated very quickly. It became more complex and less one-dimensional once it got some air.
Yeah, clearly my last sip was the best. It was still improving.
And there's still tannin though in wine, which is kind of interesting after.
I'd be perfectly happy to have it in my cellar and pull it out in 20 years, no problem. Yeah, we were also wondering, because they still did foot trotting up until the 80s, whether that had something to do too with the color besides the
That would make sense.
aging with demijohns, but also a different type of extraction because it was all foot crushed.
Yeah.
So possibly that was one of the things. And the Bartolo Mascarello?
Beautiful.
Yeah, wonderful wine.
Sweet. That was my
Yeah, I had to give the nod to the Giacomo Quinterno.
Me too.
Especially as it came on. It sort of put its foot to the floor, and I watched it go by. It's like coming up in the rearview mirror as I was tasting the Odero, and then watched it go by in the left lane.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
So off we go to 64, which is profound vintage.
Do you have guesses on the mystery wine?
Manny told me so, so I can't
check.
guess.
That's better than that.
I would like to have tried to guess it, but I have no clue. I mean, the best idea I heard at the table so far over here was somebody asked, when did Joe Heights put his Grignolino in? That's not a good guess. For the way the wine's showing, that's a good guess.
The colors of the 64 are very similar to the colors of the 67.
They are.
Yeah.
For each of these wines. It's remarkable consistency, actually.
61 is kind of a turning point as well for the single Citra Incredible.